So thank you for the questions. So the questions about how to get our department kind of looking at what other departments are doing. So from a healthcare perspective, we actually have established something called the Health Threat Operations Center, and it actually has the DoD from the TRICARE and healthcare perspective in it, and VA and us. And so we are starting to work in that arena. We actually have partnered, and we're very close to signing an MOU with DHS around how to connect. We're establishing a health kind of threat center that would directly interact with the NCIC, with the US CERT capability, because we know that this, I always think of cybersecurity as I dropped a coin or a pebble in the water and here are the ripples. So we started at the octaves and getting themselves mature. We've now matured as a department, and we're still building those capabilities. But the next thing we have to do is the healthcare sector at large, because not only do we have a big play in that ecosystem, I always talk about cybersecurity from that weakest link. And right now, those small clinics and those small 1-2 doctor organizations probably are our biggest challenge from a cyber perspective because they don't have the capabilities. And so we're actually been partnering with a lot of industry organizations, whether it's the AMA, HIMSS, Chime, a variety of others, and also the NHISAC to do that capability. We actually have talked to Deloitte and Gardner and others to look at other capabilities, and we have looked at DHS. So we're trying to get as much information from as many capabilities as possible to say, let us talk to you in your language versus you trying to talk to us in ours, because we know that those relationships are very important, and you've already built those relationships down to the local point of contact, and we have to be able to provide you with those things at that level. And we are the sector-specific agency for healthcare across the board. And so obviously cyber is one aspect of protecting healthcare. And we found in WannaCry and Petya, while it didn't hit the United States too dramatically, there were devices and things that were taken offline that have direct impact on quality of life or the ability to sustain life, which is obviously at the end of the day what we're most important and the biggest thing we have to concern ourselves with.
Beth, my name is excuse me, Chuck Royster, and I'm with United Solutions. Once again, not a commercial, but my question is, there's been a lot of buzz about how blockchain will be affecting medical records and medical information. I was wondering if you could comment on that, and as much as we've done one project, we were kind of wondering where's it going in your area?
Well, so obviously the organization that's most concerned with blockchain for us is not my organization, it's really ONC, who does the standards and has worked with electronic health records. But we're still trying to understand across the board, and one of the things that we're hearing, obviously, from the sector is the reason there was a very large adoption to the electronic health record was the HITECH Act, which helped to give funding for electronic health record. And it's very clear that the industry says if we want to do something like blockchain or the next kind of version, we need a new HITECH Act. So I know the ONC and others are trying to work through some of that.
Yes, I work at the Department of Commerce, and we have a B+ in FITAR. We're working very hard to get to an A, but I'm really wondering, how are you going to go to an A by May? What's your plan? Because it sounds quite ambitious to me.
Yeah, so we're doing it in a multifaceted arena. So we meet with GAO once a month. We worked with them to understand the metrics that they're using and how they calculate the score. So that was part one. So we understand why we have the score we have. Second, we looked at the data that is making up our score to make sure it was accurate. So we're doing the 3 Ds. One is dialogue. So we're talking to GAO, we're talking to OMB. I actually went to HOGAR, the staff, last week to talk to them. We also have some areas where here's the data that we're fixing. However, we think some of your metrics are flawed, just the way it is. and what we think potentially would be more helpful in some of those metrics, so that's part of the dialogue. So dialogue data, and then the other one that what we're really trying to do is drive change. So the other part is on a bi-weekly basis, I have a meeting with all of our operating division CIOs, and we talk about where their scores are, what data they've been provided, what maybe is driving some of that, talking about where people have moved forward and why they were able to do that, and what we need to do to eliminate some of the barriers for areas where they haven't moved. And I can say in just the Megabyte Act, when we started, it was Fs across the board. We have the first inventory of software ever. And now, except for one organization, the self-assessment has A's across the board. So it is possible, but part of it is having the dialogue, showing the data, and then driving the real change once you've got those first two.
So I got a question over here. My name's Stephen Oliver. I'm with MuleSoft. And a couple things jumped out to me in your speech. You mentioned kind of sharing data and kind of breaking down silos across the opt-ivs, creating a system of systems, right? Just replacing one system with another is not necessarily modernization, but so I wanted to ask you, how do APIs, with all the benefits they provided in the private sector for kind of interoperability, how are APIs or microservices playing a role across the agency, and how are you guys putting a strategy around that? Because you can definitely do
So
it.
did you read my paper before you came? So that is the one thing that is my, that I want to have happen over the next 12 months, is we have to have microservices and we've got to have a service-oriented architecture, period. And when I first started having that conversation, people were like, no. I have the HR system I'm trying to modernize has somewhere, I'm not quite sure, somewhere between 130 and 160 interfaces, point to point, point to point. And when we started talking about those interfaces, everyone was like, well, we're going to use Dropbox with point to point. We're going to put a file in, I'll put it in, OPM will get the file on the other side. They run some sort of bot or macro and pull the data out. No. So we are moving in that direction. I actually had a conversation today with a vendor about how we're going to do that. But we're going to start with the management systems, because we think that's kind of our big bang for our buck is, financial, the acquisition, real estate, and HR first. But we're also incubating some of the things we're incubating is microservices at the mission side, such as identity management, and figuring out how those work. And so we're going to have a couple of foundational pieces this year to pilot, and then as we do that, we're going to build a strategy and policy around it.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mark Silva, and I'm with Entity Data Federal, and I run a number of your contracts, particularly at NIAC. And I'm trying to connect some of the dots, because some of the things that we've been trying to do is look for how do we support the mission. So when you talked about blockchain, I wanted to capitalize on that, because we've been looking at what can we do to build out a virtual lab, right? So connecting some of those out to the cloud, connecting using blockchain. Is that still in its infancy stages? And are there anything else going on that you might be able to help support some of that?
So from a lab and technology perspective, we don't have just one lab or one data center, as you can imagine, in a very large organization. There is a contract we have out right now that hopefully will get awarded somewhere in the next 6 weeks or so. That will have the first kind of lab that's at an enterprise level, and a test lab. We have obviously some cloud sandboxes and things to play with, but nothing from an enterprise perspective. So that'll kind of be the nascent capability, and then we have to figure out how we're going to move it out once that initial contract is in place. So hopefully stay tuned. More to come.
Yes, Beth, Chuck Santangelo, OD&I. I just want to mention, in case you weren't aware, that ACT-IAC prepared a maturity model for FITARA. Might help you get that A.
Yes, I was on that group.
Thank you, Chuck.
Well, and what's interesting though, from our perspective, and we again met with OMB today, if we look at how OMB looks at maturity and some of that work that you guys did and where things are rated, we're done. We are mature. You look at the metrics and things that GAF does, we're D-. So that's one of the things that we have to have sort of a nexus on is how different oversight organizations are looking at us and having drive some common metrics and capabilities.
So in terms of acquisitions, how are you going to drive change? How are you going to educate programs to make sure that government is actually changing and not slowing up the implementation cycles? What are some of the goals there, and how are you improving that?
So there is a pilot right now. We actually have an innovation lab, and we actually have some capabilities where people put proposals in to try different kinds of things within our CTO's office. And one of those was around acquisition. They started with medical devices and prescriptions because as a very large provider, we spend a lot of money. So we found, for example, on something as simple as surgical masks. We were paying anywhere from some organizations were paying 5 to 10 cents a mask, to other organizations were paying $3 and $4. So the first thing is to gather the information. They're actually running a pilot right now with Watson to put all that data in, run artificial intelligence, and start trending just the various prices and things and who's doing them. As they started down the medical path arena, they've been having interactions and conversations with all of the operating divisions. And while there's a lot of medical information, there's one common thing that everyone buys. It was technology. So every one of them is like, well, how are you going to drive down the cost of laptops? How are you driving down the cost of printers? How are you driving down the cost of office supplies? So we're going to try to start taking all of the data we have. We have, I think, 13 different contracting shops with different systems. How to pull some of that data in and using the pilot that we've been using with Watson to try to have it learn and then be able to drive that information. Now they're trying to do some GPOs to see how we can do some group buying.
So thank you, everybody. Sit back.
Thank you so much. Terrific. So that concludes our business portion of the evening, but don't forget the reception, which I think is just around the corner, April, or whoever is it. We're in the